Hello, this is Alex Burkett, and you're listening to the Long Game Podcast. This episode is a part of our Kitchen Side series, where we pull back the curtain and we show you the behind-the-scenes conversations, debates, strategies, and brainstorming sessions that we have at our agency. This one is mostly a reflection of our recent experience at Spryng, a B2B marketing event in Austin, Texas, hosted by Pep Laya and the Winter Crew. It is by far our favorite event. We go every year, and this one is a reflection of our learnings, experiences, takeaways, etc. That we came back with. But the topics here we cover are quite varied, as we started out riffing on the 4 levels of AI interaction, from being a microtasker, an automator, to being a teammate, a leveling up function, and how, in our opinion, many people actually seem to be missing the mark with these tools by trying to use it, quote unquote, the right way, getting the right prompt, getting the prompt templates, as opposed to exploring it from your own first principles, from your own soul, from your own personality, and really pushing the limits on what's possible and being more of a tinkerer. We discussed prompt engineering, custom GPTs, the value of context and knowledge and feedback in using these tools effectively. So it gets pretty tactical in the beginning. But then we quickly veered into the philosophical. So a lot of the conversation at Spryng obviously was around AI, but a lot of our conversations ended up being a lot more personal, emotional, philosophical. So talking about what's the soul, where's the soul in this work? Where does human creativity really shine? What's the emergent value of like our human kind of will and creativity? And really, the main takeaway is why in-person events are so important, why this connection and community is people are yearning for it, and something like Spryng really offers this in droves. So if you've felt that existential drag of AI-generated slop, if you're wondering where you as a human still fit into the machine, this one is for you. Without further ado, here is the Long Game Podcast. Ali is talking about another Ali who writes about AI.
David, have you heard about AI with Ali?
Oh.
Ali Miller?
Yes, I subscribed to that.
Okay.
And I got an email today that was interesting.
Yeah, the 4 modes.
Yeah.
Did you read it?
I started reading it and I was like, oh, it's almost like an AI adoption maturity framework.
Yes.
What is the idea behind it? And is this like personal or organizational maturity?
I read it as organizational, but I can see it applying to personal or like solopreneur situations. 4 modes of AI interaction. And mode 1, AI as a microtasker, which I think is kind of aligned with what we'll talk about today and what we heard at Spryng. AI as a co-pilot. So an example would be write this 16-page strategy document with me and take in ongoing feedback, code this complex script, etc. Mode 3, AI as a delegate, which I think is what we're moving towards. So run multiple complex economic scenarios against a banking research data set, generate and evaluate 100 creative variations of a new ad campaign, complex long-form tasks that would otherwise consume significant human attention. Mode 4 is AI as a teammate, which is really complex. She writes at the end, the evolution timeline being 2025 and beyond for mode 4 start. So systems focused intelligence. I just like the way she broke it down. And I think it's aligned with what we'll talk about today with what we learned last week.
I like that. I'm going to have to read that. One thing that I've found is, how do I even describe this? Like there was the early days of AI when everybody was talking about prompt engineering. And I found that a hyper focus on the prompt and getting the prompt is actually a fool's errand. You see all those LinkedIn posts that are like, comment here and I'll tell you my prompt framework for my workflows. What I found is you just like gotta have high agency. And I know that's kind of an overused phrase, but I think as a meme, that's such an important concept. But I just stress test it as far as I possibly can. And I'm like, I'm just going to see if functionally it can do this thing for me. I just like, David, I showed you my example of like my fitness stuff. Like that was like the coolest example. And even the sales, I use it for a lot of my sales prep. And I was like, I should probably train a custom GPT to give you guys access to the same steps I do. And I was like, this is going to take me a lot of time. Then I was like, is it? what if I just asked ChatGPT to like take what I just gave them and asked it to, form the instructions and which knowledge docs and how would I build a custom GPT based on what you just gave me? And it gave me step-by-step instructions. So it's like, just like pushing it as far as it can go.
Yeah.
Well, what I found is I didn't fully understand why people thought like these prompt libraries were really helpful. And I realized it was just a different method of thinking where maybe for us, it comes as second nature of like asking these things. What I've experienced in speaking to some folks is they're like, yeah, I just don't know what to tell it. Like, how do I tell it what I want? And so it's almost like the pattern that I'm finding is people who have a background in writing, who are used to like figuring out their thoughts and figure out how to communicate their ideas, are actually a lot better with AI than perhaps someone who doesn't have a writing background, where they're like, I'm not used to writing out my thoughts like this. I don't know if that's actually like correlative, but that's sort of the pattern I'm starting to notice, where folks might just not be as comfortable with this process of like, what's the best way to communicate this thing, versus we might be iterating and we edit our prompts and then we like, oh yeah, this is a better output.
I think that writing as a spectrum of articulation ability, so sort of the color and the resonance and the fidelity with which you give a prompt, that's an important dimension. But I actually see it along another line, which is people who are trying to do what is, they're trying to do things the right way. As opposed, like they're trying to like find the best practice. They're like, how should I? What's the right way to do this? And I think that's ironically the exact wrong way to do it. I think what I was telling you guys the other day is AI essentially has a couple of functionalities, and like what a lot of people think of it as is just automation. And I think that is obviously very important, especially if you could streamline repetitive tasks, boring tasks, things that don't take up a lot of your time. And then there's a sort of augmentation or innovation. So it's like doing things that you couldn't have previously done. But the augmentation function is what I find most interesting, which is, what if I could increase like my own natural capacity by 50, 100, 150%? And to do that, you actually have to just think from first principles or from your own soul and spirit. Like, what do I want it to do? It's not like, what should I say to it? It's like, what do I want from it? And you just have to like, that can't come from a prompt library. It has to come from you.
What do you want?
Yeah. I think what you said, David, about like someone struggling with what's the best way to do it. And then Alex, like, there's just not one right way to use it or do it. I think when I was starting to use it for proposals a couple months ago, I also was like, best practice or how, because I'm tend to be somebody who likes to be a right way. That's just the way my brain works. And I've had to actively unlearn that throughout the last couple of years. But I actually started just asking it like, what should I ask you to help me do this?
Yes.
Or I have all this information, where should I start with you to unpack it or connect these dots? Or here's what my ideal end state is. Walk backwards and help me get to that point. And I think the best way to use it is just to give it feedback. So like to have it spit out V1, even with a really thin prompt, and then see what it gives you and then figure out, okay, I actually want it to go in this direction, or it's missing this piece. And not even like no M dashes or no emojis, like not that level of feedback, like actual like constructive thinking feedback to help it connect dots in a little bit different way or use certain context. I do think one best practice is really feeding it knowledge and giving it as much context as possible. So call transcripts, spreadsheets, really something you might not think it needs, but why not just upload it anyway and see how it uses it? That's probably one like overarching best practice, I would say, which then, requires us to gather all that information up front. But then once you get into the prompting and the iterating, there's really no right or wrong way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Do you all want to talk about Spryng?
Sure.
Hell yeah.
We just came from Spryng conference in Austin, Texas. Beautiful that time of the year, March, 80 degrees, sunny. I don't know if you guys ate a lot of tacos, but I pretty much had 1 or 2 or 10 every day.
That was like every meal for me. Like someone was like, did you eat barbecue? I'm like, No, I ate a lot of tacos.
Ooh, you missed out on the barbecue. That's a bummer.
I did.
I got Terry Blacks one
Alex
day.
had a nice barbecue experience.
With the meals, yeah. I mean, the classic, the Terry Blacks, all the sides, all the accoutrements, the beer while you're waiting in line.
You did it right.
I have to every time I go back. I deeply miss it living here in New York City. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the conference, the B2B marketing conference. So how do we want to start this?
Let's talk about the event itself first.
Yeah. The top point that I wanted to make is just the differentiation of the event itself.
Yeah.
Because one learning that we've had from almost all of our marketing leader conversations, and really most conversations I've had with clients, is there's kind of a noise problem. We've talked about this in many podcasts, but it's like sea of sameness in branding and messaging, in content, in SEO. And I think you've seen from the explosion of LinkedIn posts that Pep truly created an event that stands out and it has emotional resonance. Mm-hmm. That started from the beginning. I mean, the format itself, but like one thing I wanted to note is he sent out an email. Did you guys see this like before the event?
It literally, it felt like one of those emails that should have been sent by my iPhone. Like it was so simple and I loved it.
It was so non-conferencey. Yeah.
Yeah. I loved it so much.
Well, that's what I was going to say is like most conference emails are very formal and they're logistics based. It's like, here's what time it starts. Here's where, you get coffee. It's very much like informational.
Branded.
And what Pep did was he said, it's 7 things to remember, 7 reminders. Step number 0 is the only reason to attend Spryng is peer-to-peer interactions, learning from other people and sharing what you know. You are not coming for the talks, even if they're very good. To get the maximum value out of the event is to attend all 3 parties, which are there to create more unstructured space for serendipity and great conversation. Unlimited food and drink on us, obviously. One good 20-minute conversation with somebody can build a relationship that lasts for years. Okay. And number 1, come to the pre-party. It's a way to make friends before the event even starts. And making friends is the point. It's on da-da-da-da-da. Number 2, casual event, no suits. Number 3, don't bring a laptop. This event is for talking to people. Number 4, it gets very warm, wear sunscreen. Number 5, we'll have 5 curated table discussions. Bring your questions, share your best stuff. Number 6, day 1 is the party at the conference venue. Goes till midnight. Don't leave early. Remember, this is the point of the event. Number 7, after party, day 2, 6:30 to midnight. Definitely come. That's the point. And then he ends it. I think you get the idea. I just love that email. I mean, that's great marketing. That's great copy.
What stood out to me was the follow-up email on feedback. Mm-hmm. And it was like pure Pep and also pure Winter, because he listed out all the feedback that they got. And one of it was like, some people asked for things like they wanted more talks and whatever. And he said, that actually kind of goes against what we stand for. And so, hey, sorry, it's not for everybody, which is just, he's not just giving in to that feedback. He's like, I know what people want, or the people that I want at these events want. And if you want something different, great, go to your hotel lobby conferences, but that's not what you're going to get at Spryng. And so he's just doubling down on that positioning, which, as Winter is used for, you help find your positioning and not everyone's going to be happy.
I also liked how when he called out a couple things, he was like, I don't know what to do about this. I'm open to ideas. Like, I thought that was really cool, like calling on the collective wisdom of all the other marketers on his email list versus like, I'll fix all this myself. It becomes kind of a group effort and pulling in ideas of like, I've never done this before. I'd be curious to know like how it's worked for you. That felt very accessible.
I loved that email. The vulnerability of sharing the feedback openly was, I thought, quite courageous, but also the ability to stand firm in, I guess, its vision. I'm sure he gets some data, obviously, with like the LinkedIn posts and like the resonance from the target audience that he cares to attract. But that point on only taking the feedback that that kind of backs into what you're trying to build, I actually think is very hard to do in practice. It's one of those things that like, you could stand there and say like, I'm trying to build something differentiated, but when feedback comes in, I think most of us are tempted to act on it. And then, if you're acting on every bit of feedback from every single person, you end up optimizing for the median, which is pretty much the exact opposite of what he was trying to do with the differentiation. That's kind of the sea of sameness problem in a nutshell, right? It's optimizing for the median value.
You have an interesting point here, applying it to some of how we've operated in terms of overcorrecting for some clients, perhaps bad fit clients. And I think that's a really good point, because it is a little tough to not take feedback from folks who will pay you money, right? It's like, that's part of what we're doing, but it is quite discerning to strip away the ones that are like, this is fine if you think this way. It's just, we're not the conference for you. We're not the event for you. We're not the company for you. I think early days, I think our team is excellent at taking feedback. I think we've always been really good at gathering it from clients, talking about it as a team. But I will say that's something that I've personally learned over the last few years is like, sure, we can learn from this, but it's not that we always have to change how we operate or change our values or our principles or however it really boils down to like the core of our business. Now we're excellent at this in terms of like sitting down and being like, what can we learn? Is this worth applying? And if it is like worth applying, at what level? Is it at the sales level? Is it at the onboarding level? Is it at the execution level? But I will say that's definitely something that we had to learn through doing before.
I think you can be too receptive to feedback, right? Like there's that old quote, the feedback is the breakfast of champions. Some old business author, I think, said that, which is true. Like, I think if you're stubborn and obstinate and you never take feedback, that's obviously not a good track unless you are like the top 0.001% genius who can operate and still build relationships and alliances. But I think that's probably a platonic ideal. I don't think that probably exists. But I certainly think you can be too. I don't know if it's like you just need validation, if you need advice all the time, if you need feedback all the time to make sure you're on the right track. But I certainly think not a lot of people talk about that end of the spectrum, right?
I think that's one thing to say, like you're open to feedback. It's just, I think you can receive it and then set it down and just being like, this isn't for me, or I don't agree with this, or this doesn't align with what I'm trying to build or who I'm trying to become. I will always be open to receiving feedback, but it's not like I'm always going to agree with it. Because at the end of the day, feedback is just an opinion. And it just helps you better understand someone's expectations.
I definitely, there's certain people I don't take feedback from.
I think I mean in the context of clients.
Yeah.
Like I'm always down to hear, like, how are you feeling? What do you think? But then come back to the drawing board and being like, I'm going to not do 30% of this because this isn't aligned with what I'm trying to build. And if it's the most fundamental 30% of what they're looking for as a client, I'll just be real about if we can do that or not, or if that's something we want to build into our processes. But yeah, I don't think I'm talking about it at an individual level. I don't think I would be open to just anybody telling me something.
Well, thought experiment. I mean, clients or customers are a good filtering layer for who you take feedback from. And then you can kind of segment once you're within that sphere, because maybe there's target fit customers who are like exactly the center of your bullseye. And maybe there's like a secondary like segment that you're also serving, and maybe you're not building primarily for them, but like, you know, you still want to attract that audience. So a software company that could be like, you know, like your core customer base is SMBs, like HubSpot, for example. If they had optimized for the feedback from Fortune 500 companies, they would have optimized for the median and they would have lost to Salesforce. So I obviously don't know like what their business strategy was, but I'm assuming that they were not trying to optimize for the most complex piece of technology that could do everything. So you have to delineate between the types of customers and clients, but you're still, I think, exposed to more feedback than just the people paying you. You're exposed to people on LinkedIn. You're exposed to people that you meet at networking events, and all of these presumably, or not all of them, but many of them presumably could be your customers or could be your clients. So I think that's where maybe the filtering problem becomes a little difficult, especially when it comes to messaging, right? If you get like criticism or constructive feedback from a bit of messaging, like let's just say, you know, for example, Finn McKenty teaching us how to do LinkedIn. He's like, you don't want to appeal to all people. Obviously, you don't want to be salacious and kind of insultative, but we could say certain things that I think are controversial. Like in the past, doing the whole content and SEO should drive conversions, should be, you know, growth focused and all of that stuff. Now, I'm sure we could get a lot of people in our comment section saying, well, what about brand? What about community? And it's like, okay, like, are we going to water our message down to appeal to those people who in their context are right, but for our context and who we're trying to actually attract isn't right for us? You know?
I don't have anything to add. That was well said.
Yeah, that was great. I don't disagree.
Well, where else do you want to take this?
What were common themes? I mean, AI was the obvious overarching theme that I think we all ran into, but what stood out to y'all? Like, were there any conversations where you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to go away and think about this, or I'm going to write this down and like really think about how to implement it?
I think this year for me was much more, or maybe it was because I came in with this lens, but I much more felt it and I vibed as opposed to like finding tactical, practical discussions. Or maybe this year it was more about the vibes and the emotions and the resonance as opposed to like,
I think so.
Last year I did feel like it was a little bit more meaty and like nitty gritty in terms of like, here's how we're planning for the future of SEO. Here's how we're implementing Jasper or whatever tools. This year, I much more came away with vibes as opposed to specific discussions. I don't know how y'all felt.
I felt that too. Maybe it's because it's the third year and it feels like a reunion every time I go now. Like I see the same faces and we kind of expect to see each other and hang out. And yeah, we talk a bit about some of the tactics, but I similarly walked away more trying to understand sentiment and vibes. Like one of the conversations that it was explicitly about AI, but it ended up being about how we're so unexcited about like a future where everyone's just using AI to produce stuff. It's like, yeah, it kind of, we've talked about this before. It brings up the bar for like the median quality, but it also means a lot of it is going to be more of the same. And people were talking about like Chelsea Castle, she's at Close.io now. She's talking about creating a children's book as a differentiator. Like, I'm sure you could use AI to write that, but they're going to be printing it out. That's going to be part of their, I don't know how it fits into B2B marketing and the sales industry, but it's different. It stood out. Another guy was talking about also publishing a magazine. So, and they were talking about reading long form and reading long form specifically from people. And so it was just another data point that was going counter to what a lot of people on LinkedIn are talking about and kind of supports what we've been talking about here as a group, where yes, there's benefit to AI. Pendulum is going to swing. How do we stay ahead of it? And like, what tastes are changing right now? So that was fascinating to me, and it'd be cool to create some sort of children's book.
Was that part of so the day one, the first table was, I think everybody had the same topic, and it was essentially like practical applications of AI in your work. Was that part of that table discussion or a different one?
No, it was a different discussion where each table had a different topic. And my table was specifically about how we're using AI
in content,
in producing content.
That was the one where we split off and I went to the SEO and LLM optimization discussion.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'd love to talk about that in a minute. But because during the first table, when we were all talking about AI across all the tables, I had a very, very similar discussion, which is to say, we spent maybe 5 or 10 minutes talking about the tactical things we're doing and very quickly went into existential territory.
Yeah.
So I think some of the tactical things are probably not surprising if anybody's listened to this podcast, but things like repurposing, podcast clips into different formats, generically using it as a sparring partner, using it to research and synthesize unstructured qualitative data. But eventually it turned, and this is a very intelligent table, like the people at the table were all, I would say, pretty AI forward. A lot of it turned to, it's really cool. It's kind of this, like it's a scale and like on one side it's balanced. So one side, like you think it's unleashing so much interesting work you can do now, which children's book, for example, I could probably write one better now with AI than I could have before. So it's kind of unleashing on the first order and the first layer, interesting new expressions of human creativity. But like anything in life, if you think about it for longer than 25 seconds, you start to really play out the scenarios, right? And that's where a lot of the discussion in that table went was, well, what happens when all of the internet is just basically AI agent generated content, especially when we get to like the video avatars and you can't really tell whether it's a person talking or it's a video avatar talking. You can't tell whether they wrote the script or they just kind of summarized a bunch of content from a forum. And it, has the simulacrum of authenticity, but you don't ever know for sure. And I think our collective sentiment was like, it's a little I don't know if it's depressing is the right word.
Makes me sad,
but it's a little like disillusioning. Like it's a little disempowering.
Yeah.
I think the question then that's going to be probably important in the future is like, where is the place for humans and our own agency and creativity?
that's what, well, I think we'll come back to the LLM and SEO stuff, Alex, but that was one of the conversations that stuck out to me. I didn't come in until the afternoon on day one. And this was also the table discussion where all the different topics were listed on the screen. Ours was efficient growth. So we were like, well, what does this mean? What does it mean to us? It was an interesting blend of 3 founders. Justin Rundo was part of it. So marketing lead, a consultant, and then an IC at an agency. So super interesting mix of folks. We ended up kind of splintering off into 2 different conversations, myself and the other 2 founders. What does efficient growth mean? What are we doing? What are we finding? So it was somewhat tactical, but the majority of the conversation was about like the 20 to 30% of our time and budget spent on what we would consider inefficient growth. So the things that you can't map ROI to right away, the stuff that takes probably a lot of time and energy, like handwritten notes, one-on-one dinners, founder dinners, community-based stuff, meetups. Like I was telling them about how we do all of our meetups. I told them about the group that you were part of, Alex, that yielded a good conversation, all of that stuff. And it was so refreshing to really hear about the time that people spend that isn't too worried about like, what's my return on this $1,700 ticket to this event? Like no one's really, I mean, obviously you think about that, but you're not like trying to go home and calculate the numbers of like, what kind of sales did I get out of this event? Which is, first of all, not how Pep designed it. That's what actually part of the feedback he wrote was that he thought there were too many agencies there. I thought that was an interesting bullet in that email. Too many, I think he said agencies or individual consultants. And some of it was the human side of things. It was like, not only is this good for playing the long game with potential customers, partners, investors, but it literally nourishes my soul to go meet people in person and learn about what they're doing and not talk about work, talk about families, creative pursuits, travel. That's actually what I think connects people to then eventually work together. Because I will die on the hill of like people work with people that they like. And nowadays it's hard to understand how well you connect with people over a computer, over a call like this. So that was what stuck with me. Don't exactly know what came out of it tactically, but I don't think that was the point. But I hear you in terms of like the human connection and really talking about vibes and sentiment. And I think it was on LinkedIn. I saw maybe Chelsea, maybe somebody else just posted about like marketers are pretty lonely. I don't exactly know where that post is. I'll go find it. But a lot of people, not only are they teams of one or leadership teams of one with people who roll up to them, but you're on the computer all the time. You're stuck in this echo chamber of all these repeat posts. No one's doing anything new. Maybe leadership isn't open to doing new things. And so you're stuck in this like somewhat creative, somewhat scientific practice. And it's kind of draining to be, it's like you and AI, right? So I think that the ultimate value to me and what it sounded like to most other people with Spryng is just like, I made some friends, I had some drinks, I felt seen, I felt heard, maybe I got some good ideas. That to me felt like the most valuable part of it.
There's an interesting irony in the fact that the table discussion was efficient growth and like just the total,
I know. We were like, what is not efficient? What are we doing that's not efficient? Because that's the cool stuff.
Yeah, what came, I didn't say this out loud at the table because I was like, I don't know if this is a group for it. But the thought that occurred to me during all the discussion about the different, like how we're sad about a future with just all this AI slop and all of that, what in my mind, I was like, the big question for me is like, where's the soul? Like, where's the human connection? I think in a lot of our work, we require like inputs to be creative and think of new ideas and things like that. But when everything's just AI or we're sitting alone and we're not going out to meet people and all we're just trying to think about how to use more and more AI, I think that sort of diminishes a bit of like the human soul a little bit. Like, okay, cool. I'm going to produce thousands of pages of AI, but I don't care about this. Like I'm just doing it because of this metric that I'm supposed to hit. Whereas we go to these events and we meet people and like, oh, this is the non-scalable stuff that I find a lot of joy in. And ironically, is probably going to have more impact than spinning up thousands of pages with AI. And so that seems to be something that a lot of people are seeking. Like, yes, we say human connection. People talk about like quality content and how they're willing to read long form. And I'm just like, yeah, because that stuff has soul. Like, you can create music with AI probably, but like, where's the soul? Like you definitely need a human in there to give it that it factor that resonates with people. So I don't know where I'm going with that, but that seemed to be a theme that I felt from many of my conversations. It's like, yes, we're excited about it, but it doesn't nourish me.
I think a lot of people, with the way they interact with music is just a functionally like background music, background noise. So I don't know if that's like necessarily the most, I don't know. Sometimes I think like what I believe and what I want and what I need is different than maybe the vast majority of people, specifically with regards to art. Like what we're doing is maybe not art. It's artistic in some ways. But I definitely agree with like that broader point of this came up in my table discussion was all of this like AI slop efficiency, like create, all that stuff. It kind of begs the question after you like pull, yourself a year, 2, 3 years out and see the internet. And as a consumer, not necessarily a creator, and like think about the marginal value you can create. It kind of begs the question, like, what are we doing this for? And I think that's maybe where some of the existential conversations and sentiments came up is like, you really start to think like, well, what the fuck is the purpose of, like what's the underlying why, whether it's AI created, human created, whatever. It's like, what are we doing? Like there's that broader question that comes up.
Ooh, existentialism.
Well, and Ali, to your point, I would say 95+% of my conversations had nothing to do with business.
Yeah.
Same.
That's also because I have known many of these people for a decade. So conversations with Pep and David and you, Ali, and, like, especially the late night ones, like we're talking about purpose and family and raw denim and all kinds of random stuff. But I would say like, it was like honestly on the margins that I had talked about SEO or B2B marketing. Again, I don't know if that's just like this event this year or like our age and like how we're coming in as veterans of the space. But I definitely felt like most of the conversation was very personal. I
felt that too.
You see the post on LinkedIn, like I feel like everybody else is saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Like everybody else is saying like, yeah, I got to know people. Like I had heart to hearts.
Yeah. Which I think is what Pep intended, right?
I had a lot of heart to hearts.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of crazy actually, because I don't recall any other conferences where that happens.
No.
Maybe like 1 or 2, like you meet.
You didn't have heart to hearts at Inbound?
Well, you do, but like it's usually like when you go off on your own and it's like one random person that you connect with or something
after
like
hours.
That. Whereas this was the vast majority, like the bulk of the conversations were like that. Pretty fascinating stuff. On the efficient growth too, one idea that came to my mind is, that old quote, I think his last name is Wanamaker or something like that, had the quote, 50% of my ad budget is wasted. The problem is I can't tell you which half.
Yeah, I've heard that.
I believe that Rory Sutherland, I'm too tired to actually do the citations here, but I think he railed against that and was actually saying like the half that you believe is wasted is actually the half that paradoxically is not wasted. Because the ability to iron out and track and linearly, logically engineer, that portion, like there's actually no alpha or competitive value in that. It's actually in the murky areas that most of the alpha occurs.
I think people just have a much stronger like bullshit radar now. I don't know. I think just spending more time behind our phones and our computers, and maybe this doesn't always apply to how people buy software, but I think it does apply to how people buy agency services. I love the inefficient stuff, the stuff that takes maybe more time than it should. That's the stuff that I think actually makes a bigger impact, and maybe not every single one, but it feels good to do something that's just like human to human, right? And not just like, oh, this is a 2x ROI, blah, blah, blah. There's room for that, right? Like that's how you got to operate to keep your business alive, but it's not the stuff, like you said, that nourishes you.
I get the ick, honestly. Like I've gotten the ick from people in the past when, at a conference, like I won't say the conference I was at, but it was in San Francisco, as you could imagine. And like everybody who came up to me just had like the most like extractive, like, what are you trying to get out of this? Like, how do you use this tool? Like, how do you like, it was just drilling me with these questions because they wanted something from me. And I just got such a repulsive feeling from that. I don't vibe with people like that at all. Where they're very much like into the transactional nature of it. I'm like, all right, like this is just what, like, especially in person. I don't know. Like it's different if you're cold emailing me. It's funny. I actually prefer when somebody cold emails me that they just tell me exactly what they want and not try to like beat around the bush.
Yeah.
But like in person, I'm like, what are we doing? Like, what are we here for?
Yeah.
Like,
I'm just like, can I just drink my beer? Like,
yeah.
I actually realized when those questions get asked in person, I get kind of shocked and I'm like, I have to context switch because I'm having a beer, trying to have a normal conversation. And all of a sudden I get this very tactical question. I'm like, let me switch the way I'm thinking first. Okay, here's a little tidbit that I can share with you.
Didn't realize this was but
I don't want to talk about
sales call. Like, yeah, my shoulders tense up. I'm like, oh shit. Okay, like I'll button up my tie here. Yeah,
I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think like we've talked about the Spryng events before, but the broad idea is that like getting in person is such a huge value add. I do think like Ali, your point on like marketers being lonely is probably under reference. We've talked about this before, but the sense of malaise and cynicism, which I don't vibe with either. I actually think that's, grow up, right? Like you have agency, you can make your own life decisions. Like I'm not totally like the throw your hands up, wave them in the air, and just like say
like you just don't care.
You just don't care. Like no, but actually, like that kind of apathy, I don't vibe with that, right? Like you have power to do things that are meaningful. But I do think like the loneliness, maybe the isolation. Loneliness is maybe the wrong word, but like the isolation and the solitude, or like the antisocial nature of not antisocial, but do you know what I mean? Like we're just sitting behind computers all day.
Yeah.
We're on, I hate actually that we're on Riverside right now. Like I much prefer being in person. It feels so much more sterile. It really does.
Come to Boston. Come to Boston. It's popping over here.
Yeah. I also, it's like, if your job makes you lonely, you probably need to go do something that's not related to your job. That's kind of part of my opinion, but I also get it because I am as introverted as they come, and I feel isolated working from home every day. I've been remote my whole career, and I wish I had an office to go to, which I never thought I would say. I love traveling to see you guys. I love traveling to see the team. But yeah, I mean, there's more communities than ever. Host a meetup, do a dinner, go to Spryng, like travel and see your coworkers. Or I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot available to you nowadays. People are trying to solve this IRL or lack thereof problem. But I get it at like if your job does give you some purpose, you have purpose in terms of like what you're creating for your company, even the metrics and the performance that you drive. There can be a little bit of a dopamine boost there. And especially if you're a team of one working from home, or you're stuck doing just like the very bare bones stuff, don't really get to flex your creative muscles. Like I get it to an extent. And that's why I'm glad the stuff like Spryng exists and people are doing more of that, but you just have to go find it,
I feel very fortunate that I live in New York City, which feels very different than most US cities in that regard. And I'm sure there's invisible reasons, structural reasons. I do think the fact that like everybody's apartment is very expensive, and the city outside of your apartment is very fun, and everybody's apartment is small and kind of cramped and usually kind of shitty. It makes you want to go out and actually explore and like live it up in the city that you're paying so much money and taxes to be in.
Yeah.
And then I also think it attracts like a certain style of person who's not only type A and ambitious, but also very outgoing and proactive. So when I do meetups here, people come. It's fun, and then I'm just not the only person throwing meetups. There's always dinners, and like it's almost like I'm overbooked. So I feel very stimulated in that way.
Yeah.
But your point on people are trying to solve for this. I don't know if this is going to digress us, but I think people are solving for it in a very surface level, like
really
facile way. It's like very much there's a real problem, and that is people are lonely, they're isolated in work contexts. Like a lot of people are going back to office, which I actually think is probably a good thing. But like if you're remote all the time, you feel this need to like get social activity. And what I've seen in some of these new communities that are popping up is they're pressing that pain point, but they're solving it in a way that like a tech person would solve it, which is optimization and efficiency. So I saw an ad that was like, there's no third places in New York, which first off is absolutely ridiculous. It's
That's
a city made up of third places. Like it's like you throw a rock and you'll hit a third place. But I think I was riffing on this with you, David. Third place isn't just in terms of dimensionality. It's not just a space. It's also the time dimension. So it's like a coffee shop can be a third place, but it doesn't need to be. If you go every single day and become a regular there and meet other people who are also regulars there, that's when it becomes a third place. So I think some of these communities are a little bit missing the mark, because what they'll promise is, hey, get dinner with 6 strangers and like have vulnerable, intimate conversations. And it gives you this little dopamine or serotonin hit. And then afterwards, you don't see them again. But I think the thing that a lot of people need is something that lasts throughout time.
Yes, the consistency.
And I think that's what I get from Spryng, is seeing the same faces and new faces. And then the new faces are quickly brought in and made to feel comfortable and warm and welcome in the family. But I think seeing the repeat exposure and in a broader sense, like we work remote and I've worked remote for a long time, but we get this extended B2B family of sorts. Yeah. It sounds so sentimental.
B2B family.
But do you not, like, are you not earnest enough to admit the same? You know? I think, yeah.
I think I know what you're talking about in terms of those dinners. Like I've seen those ads on Instagram and stuff, and they seem like good and a good idea in theory, but then you never see them again. So it's like a date that doesn't work out. Like that relationship means nothing to me because it did not persist over time. This isn't related to work, but like we've been in this apartment for 4 years, and I know all the cashiers at our Jewel. I know multiple bartenders are like up and down the street. A lot of people who work at those restaurants, the people at our gym, I say hi to, and I'm like, now this feels like a community. You know, I mean, that's what I would call third places. I don't go sit at the grocery store for hours, but like when you feel known and seen over the course of time, whether it is once a year at Spryng, every week at your coffee shop, or maybe every month at your meetup, it's like, I see you, I know what to ask about, I know what's going on in your life, or I know enough to ask about what's going on in your life. That to me is like a persistent community, and those become those third places. It's not just like a one-off, like, oh, I went to this restaurant for a night and I got out of my house. Like maybe that's where you get started, you know, getting used to being uncomfortable in that way. But I don't think that counts as a third place.
There could be value, I understand, in exposure and disclosure. Like sometimes you just need somebody to talk to. And like ChatGPT can be a great way to effectively journal with a machine that gives you input back, right? So sometimes you just need to say something out loud. But I do think that sense of community and belonging, it comes with imposition of like, not sacrifice is the wrong word, but like skin in the game and like long-term cohesion, right?
Yeah. Community requires a lot of work, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I've been to one of those dinners. I haven't gone since. Because
what is it called?
It's a weird thing. Time Left. Is that what you're...
Yes. Yeah. I've seen those on Instagram.
I didn't get the ads. I heard about it from another podcast. And I was like, that sounds interesting. Let's try it out. And it was so weird because it was a mix of people from different backgrounds and different personalities, some of which I was less fond of. And some where I was like, you're cool, but you're like trying to shortcut this and sharing all your trauma, which I don't want to hear about right now. Like too much, dude.
0 to 60.
And then like, we'll exchange numbers and there's nothing really to talk about. And I'm like, yeah, that was cool. I'm not really feeling it though.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing with those. And I don't know, there's probably a self-selection bias with maybe some of these events where I don't want to denigrate people, but like there's probably like they have like a level of loneliness that, you know, like I don't know. I don't know if I want to dive into that area. Maybe on my personal newsletter.
Yeah.
But I think like sometimes people will take a facsimile or simulacrum of social interaction like LinkedIn as if it were the real thing. And I'm not going to completely denigrate the value of something like LinkedIn, but you're operating under the veneer of like a public facing persona. You are fighting for attention with an algorithm that's incentivizing certain attention grabbing behavior and not necessarily like fully authentic behavior, right? So I think it can be a wonderful place to meet people and see who you may vibe with. I've started a lot of interactions and now relationships with people on Twitter and on LinkedIn, but it can't be like there's no real replacement for some of those longer term communities, and not just like one-on-one, but like multiple people who kind of like thread and know one another.
Yes.
Well, it's kind of hard to go back into like more of the tactical findings now, isn't it?
Should we tactically talk about how to find
so let's
community?
talk about LLM optimization.
Is there anything else that stood out to you from the event?
I don't know if it's a byproduct of getting older or of our tenure in the industry or by nature of us being an agency, but it feels like a lot of marketing and like building our business nowadays is like, it is just relationships and making friends. Like, I'm not pitching anybody, but people that I'll see once every couple months or once a year, I'll be like, hey, I got a new job. Like, I actually thought of you and I need help with SEO. But it's not like a strictly professional like conversation. Like, I know that they traveled to this country to see their grandma before they passed away. Like, right? Like, that's not stuff that you know of if it's just like strictly a working relationship. And that brings me a lot of joy because it's sort of like this overlapping of professional life and personal life. There's no weird bifurcation or severance now of the two different lives. It's just all together. And it means that when I go to a conference like Spryng, I get to hear about this guy's family and how he met his wife and his daughter, who's a badass, and she's only a couple months old, but he sees her personality. And then we also talk about his job at a private equity firm and like how that impacts family life and things like that. It feels a lot more wholesome rather than maybe earlier in my career or different types of conferences where it was just very tactical. It was just like, so what are you working on? Or like, what do you do? I rarely got that question at Spryng. It was just like, we started off talking about like, oh, what brought you here and everything. Like, oh, where'd you fly in from? Oh, is that where your family is? And it naturally evolved rather than trying to have this more transactional conversation. I don't think I have any transactional conversations anymore.
Yeah, I think it's like we're hitting the point on the midwit bell curve where we're hitting the other end, which is like the simplistic version again.
Yeah.
Because I believe we probably all went through the middle phase where I know for a fact, at least me and David, were very like growth, like complex growth hack engineering, like find the silver bullet, like what's the most sophisticated, crazy shit that nobody else is doing. And I kind of ignore a lot of that now. And I think functionally we can just build a great business and services, which entails hiring a great team and training them and like having the right services that position ourselves for where the puck is going, but also what the data is telling us works.
Yeah.
And then just have exposure in the places where it's necessary. Obviously dial in our messaging. All of that aligns with our core principles, values, value proposition. And then I remember this guy. He's a friend of mine from college, and he was in sales. And he's a couple of years older than us, and just kind of a funny. Like he had a couple beers, and he was telling us, he's like, you know what sales is? Talking to people. It's like one of those pseudo profound things you hear, at the bar, and we're just like, cool, man. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
but he's kind of right.
Yeah.
Talking to
we
people.
talk about that. That should be a separate conversation. This had a very clear theme to it.